So I'm a biblical scholar. That means I love studying the Bible. I love the chances I've had to do academic work, to understand context and history, make sense of the story. But primarily, I'm a pastor, which means that all of my study, any work that we do to understand context or translate original languages or bring archaeology to bear to help us understand what's happening, all of that has to ultimately land in an encounter with Jesus. And there's this really interesting story near the end of the Gospels that illustrates that. Jesus himself shows up after his resurrection to encounter two of his disciples, and he essentially gives them a Bible study. He explains to them the scriptures concerning himself, and it doesn't work. It doesn't get them to where they need to be. It's only when he sits with them, breaks bread with them, reenacts the Eucharist meal with them, that they finally recognize who they're sitting across the table from. And what this reminds me is the idea that all the study in the world, all the theory, all the quoting scripture till we're blue in the face is not the same thing if it doesn't look like the grace and peace of Jesus, if it doesn't result in us following his way through the world. Because that's the heart of the Christian story. Not the theory, not the things that we think, but the path that we choose to follow.
I could quote that scripture at you. I could break it down for you. Jesus Christ himself could show up here and explain the Bible to us personally. And yet all of that theory in the world still would not be enough to get us pedaling. You see, even after he explained to them everything that was said in scriptures concerning himself, they approached the village to which they were going, and Jesus continued on as if he were leaving. So they begged him, "Stay with us. It's almost evening. The day is almost over." And so he agreed. But when he went inside and was at the table with them, he took bread, gave thanks, broke it, and was about to hand it to them when finally their eyes were open. And they recognized in that moment who they were sitting with. This is one of the most beautiful and also perhaps one of the most revealing moments in Scripture. Because look, I don't know how this worked. Like, did Jesus honestly look different? Was this some kind of spiritual blinding? Is this moment really just a metaphor for something that's far more important happening here? I don't know. But I do know this story is working really hard to tell us something. And the best guess that I can come up with for why this story was included in the Bible, a story of Jesus and two disciples that Luke can't even remember, is the reminder that knowledge, theory, Bible studies, even Bible studies led by Jesus, none of that will accomplish what an encounter with divine life will. Like, I don't know how to take this story as anything other than a clear and intentional statement that understanding the Bible, thinking the right things, studying the right passages, even interpreting them correctly is not the same thing as sitting and eating a meal with Jesus. Listening to Jesus, watching Jesus, following along on the way of Jesus so completely as to shape your path in the world that it actually looks like you begin to ride with him. What this story tells me is that I could get up here and I could quote scripture at you till I'm blue in the face. None of that would guarantee I would even notice Jesus if he walked in the back of the room. For that, I would need to be able to show you, to demonstrate that Jesus is truly at the center of my life. And yes, that means at the center of how I interpret the Bible. But importantly, more importantly, it means at the center of how I view my neighbor. At the center of how I imagine who God is. At the center of how I imagine what God is trying to accomplish. At the center of how I think God would accomplish that in the world. Because if that doesn't look like Jesus, then somehow I've missed the point through all my study. Anything less than that, even if it comes wrapped in a Bible, it is less than the heart of the Christian story. It is less than the heart of the God who looks upon us with nothing less than the grace and the peace of Jesus.